They can revise the DOT permit that they have, whatever. So.
Okay, welcome everybody, welcome to the Newcastle Town Board meeting of May 13th, 2025. The board has been in executive session, and prior to that, the board was at a joint meeting at with the Pleasantville Village Board at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant for Veolia's annual report. And executive session followed after that, and now I'd like to ask for a motion to open the public work session.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so we are going to start. Jeremy is with us online. Hello, Jeremy.
Lino, can you remind me, I can still vote or not? I apologize, I don't recall.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we are going to start off with a discussion of the Gedney Pond update and where things stand with the process we're engaged in to make sure that we don't have algal growth like we did last year. Hi, Dennis.
Hello.
So can you tell us what's going on with Gedney Pond?
You wanna sit?
Do you wanna sit down?
Yeah, probably better close and spread these out just.
Absolutely.
Make yourself
Do
comfortable,
whatever
Dennis,
is
please.
easiest for you.
Just let me get it away.
So it's engineer night tonight at the work session, so. Thank you. Okay. Yes,
Welcome, Dennis.
thank
Hi
you.
there.
Thank you for having me. So yes, we got our applications in to New York State DEC. There were two applications that were required. One which is more of a historic, typical, which is an application for a permit to use a pesticide for the control of an aquatic pest. That would have been applicable regardless of year. And then starting in January of this year, DEC now is taking jurisdiction over more areas as wetlands than they did prior. So Gedney Pond fell into that category, so we had to apply for a DEC permit as well, freshwater wetlands permit as well. Those applications were signed by like first day of this month. They were submitted to the agencies. We just got word from DEC that we got a notice of complete application, which is a very good sign because in my former life, we felt that agencies would just give you a notice of incomplete application just to buy time, so because they were always overwhelmed with applications. So what kicks in now is a public notification period for DEC, which is 30 days, and I believe tomorrow, I'm assuming the Journal News, yes, the 14th tomorrow, this will be published as well to satisfy the public notice requirements.
So Dennis, what exactly are they publishing? The actions that we expect to take at Gedney?
This is the summary of what appears at DEC's website. It's just a description of size of the pond, what we're going to be doing, why it's regulated under this under these regulations with New York State DEC, and that the lead agency is going to be DEC. That's basically it. And if there's any comments with regards to the freshwater wetlands application, they would be sent to DEC.
Okay, thanks.
As far as so, which I've said before, I kind of look at this in two parts. So I've been to the pond last week and this week, so obviously it's some of the growth has started, certainly not in the concentration and volume that it got to last year. In fact, which is a good sign, the levels look fairly high. You can't really see the aerators. They're on. You can just see little diffraction patterns at the surface. So there is no water breaching. So the volume right now of water is probably our friend in terms of dilution. And also I noticed with the rain over the weekend, when I visited the pond yesterday, there was areas that were formerly covered, kind of down sort of like, I'll say the central midpoint, the vein of the pond, which was now open water. And if you just wanted to know where the material went, if you were standing on the bridge by the outlet, you certainly saw some of those floating plants at the spillway, and then when you turned 180 degrees further downstream. So that flushing is helpful at this time, you know, while we're biding our time until, you know, we can get the approvals to actually do the applications of the herbicide.
And what else has been done so far? I mean,
Right.
I'll let you.
No, good point. I needed that lead in, thank you. So that was the spring side of things. The investigation for our fall hydro raking of all the rooted material and aquatic plants. The bathymetry survey took place in April, so that, you know, and that's a separate company that's going to be doing that versus who's doing the aquatic herbicide application. So they went around and kind of did a, you know, a mapping of the bottom, I'll call it, just to determine, you know, how much material and what areas are going to need to be raked, as well as taking a couple of, I guess, sediment quality samples that, you know, had to go to the laboratory for analysis. So we see, you know, what the quality of the material is when we get it out, which, you know, will dictate, you know, what you can and cannot do with that material based on those results. We haven't gotten those results as of yet.
Dennis, we talked this week, or last week, that this isn't necessarily bad timing for the application of the pesticide here.
Right.
Maybe you could share that a little bit.
Thank you. So my analogy was, because I believe that, you know, in a perfect world, we were probably looking at the end of May to do a first application depending on what we observed. And, you know, as I've said before, like, you know, since this isn't a swimming pool, like you can't just, you know, willy-nilly be like, yeah, we'll throw a ton now and we'll come back tomorrow and whatever. It's like, no, there's definitely, you know, a set program, you know, not only in compliance with the regulations, but also part of the permit. And so I guess the analogy that I had mentioned to Rob, I said, you know, if you have a swimming pool, you know, you could chlorinate it in February. I mean, that's up to you, but I don't think that would be the best use of a resource, because you're not expecting anything in February, and that application is not gonna hold out until you get to the swimming season. You're gonna need to reapply. So there is a timing aspect to this to sort of get your best bang for the buck. So that's kind of what we're balancing as well.
And what is that timing aspect? Could you explain?
I think in this case, it's gonna be in June, you know, because we're hoping to get the permits and then they're probably gonna come out shortly thereafter, because you're not gonna wanna wait longer than that.
So wait, so you want to apply the pesticides in June and then you think we'll get the permit? What's the order?
Oh, no, I'm sorry,
What's the order of it?
You would, the hope is to get the permits in June, because the public comment period ends on June 13th, so we're hoping shortly thereafter we get the permit. And I know Little Bear Environmental, who's doing the herbicide application, said to us in email that the timing for her is such that right after we get the permits, we'll do the applications in Kidney. And then, you know, I would say timing wise, probably weeks after the first application, there's a follow-up visit to see, you know, how well it did work, and if there needs to be a follow-up application that would be applied at that time. That would probably be obviously more in the summer.
And then when does the raking take place?
So we're looking to schedule that in the November-ish time frame, because we figured, you know, when the park is least utilized and, you know, when temperatures drop a bit, so when all of that swamp thing emerges, you know, from its submerged layer, you know, when it's out in the open and needs to dry, kind of limits, you know, some of the olfactory response. So that's what we're hoping for.
Okay, so what you're really saying is that if you do it in the summer, it's gonna stink? very badly
think-
and people won't be able to use the park. I'm just trying to translate.
I'm sorry, yes, yeah, I mean,
Is that,
it is, yeah, odors that I'm used to because I spent my professional life in wetlands. I know when other people don't appreciate that and I understand it, so we figured as best as we can. Obviously, you don't wanna go too into winter because, these guys aren't using icebreakers, so it's like, you need to be able to complete the work, but I still think it's important to have a period where, temperatures are decreased, but we're still gonna get some benefit of drying time, so that we can move, material after it's, dewatered and dried out.
How long is that process from when they start to when it's off-site and people will find the park pleasant again?
It's gonna be weeks for that to dry out. And I hesitate because I don't have as much experience with, I'll say, vegetated matter. I know with dredge material, it's weeks, when you're just dealing with the sediments. But in this case, because it's plant matter, that in and of itself drying out, will I think be accelerated compared to, when stuff is tied up into, like soft sediments and clays where it takes a while for that water to actually, sort of leave the matrix.
so and Dennis, what can we expect to see after you apply the herbicide and you do an analysis and you might reapply it again? Could we expect to see some usage of the pond, which is typical? Will it appear pretty clear? This is all before the raking can take place.
Right. I mean, it's gonna look like a pond in the sense that, it's certainly not, and I know I've said this before, it's certainly not gonna look like Caribbean waters, you're not gonna get that level of clarity.
But will it look like it looked, say, 5 years ago?
Yeah, you're hoping to sort of reset that clock.
Okay.
And again, last year, that growth, it doesn't impact the turtles, it doesn't impact the frogs, it's the fish were the ones you worried about, obviously, because they need the dissolved oxygen in the water in order to survive.
Yeah, that was quite sad and the smell was terrible. So
Yeah, there's nothing pleasant about it, I would agree with you, yes.
so can we expect all of that to be pretty much mitigated this year?
Yeah, in fact, I'm not holding out hope for this because I still think we should do this two-pronged approach, but the person, Nicole from Little Bear said, when we let her know that we were planning to do a hydro raking in the fall, her answer was, oh, well, gee, you should, maybe you wouldn't have to do that, based on the herbicide applications, but I kind of backed off from that just a little bit because I'm like, well, to me, you're dealing with the floating plants and the algae, which are not rooted, and that's what everybody sees. I said, there is a fair amount of, subaquatic rooted plants there that, I'm not sure we're gonna get the same level of response, and even if we did, it still is not a negative to kind of get out some of that organic matter because that helps to contribute to the sort of lower dissolved oxygen levels. So again, to sort of like reset the clock, I still think the two-pronged approach is the best one.
Yeah, I agree. And I do wanna put this into context for people to understand that we really value Gendy Pond and it's a community asset and we wanna keep it that way, but it is a wetland and it was always a wetland, and what it's doing, as you explained to us last year, is it's reverting back to its natural state. So in a way, we're fighting nature. But like I said, we recognize that it's a community asset and we wanna keep it as such. So thank you, Dennis. I know this is a whole process and it's not easy to do, but thank you for sticking with it and giving us an update.
Of course,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Anyone on the board have any
Dennis.
questions for Dennis?
No.
Okay.
Thank you for your diligence.
Trying, thank you.
Okay. Alright, so let's move on to the next item on the work session agenda. We have the Duck Pond pedestrian bridge update. Rob, you're giving that?
So Jeff Gaspar, our
Oh,
town
Jeff,
engineer,
okay,
is gonna
hello
come,
Jeff,
so
welcome.
he'll talk about the next couple projects. We've been delayed a little bit
And
on the
And the sidewalk.
in the 117 sidewalk, right? Jeff will talk, we've been delayed with the pedestrian bridge, and Jeff will just go through where we've been the last couple months and where we're headed right now.
Sure, so we bid out the Route 120 pedestrian bridge and Duck Pond Bridge late last year. I believe bid opening was in January. We got 3 bids. I'm just recapping for everybody if who's not familiar. We got 3 responses to the RFP. 2 of the bidders were found to be not responsible or not responsive. They didn't have, basically they lacked the experience to actually execute. We felt execute the bridge. They had no bridge experience on any of their provided experiences, and that left one bidder who withdrew their bid because they made a mistake on their bid, and ultimately, as you know, we ended up rejecting all bidders. About a dozen contractors took out the bids. We can tell from how we published it on BidNet. So I reached out to a couple of the contractors to find out why they didn't actually bid on it. And
Oh, Jeff, could you talk into the microphone a
oh
little
yeah, I'm
bit
sorry.
more?
Oh, was it not on? Alright, sorry about that. So we spent a little bit of time analyzing why we didn't get a good response to the RFP, and we ended up going through a change order process with Tectonic to make the bid, the next RFP, we're revising it to remove some unknowns and allow the contractor can reduce his risks, which allows him to bid better on it. So I expect to have the revised bid documents, drawings and bid specs by the end of this month, so hopefully we go back out to bid for early next month. Alright, now one of the biggest obstacles which changed from the design phase to the construction phase was when we originally looked at it's actually 3 prefabricated bridges. They would be manufactured off-site, trucked to the site, and then dropped onto a foundation. The lead time for those bridges were somewhere in the, I think, 6 to 8 week when we did our initial investigation for this option, and then when bids came back, they were 6 to 8 months to actually have the bridges delivered, have those. So there was a significant increase in lead time, which that exacerbated the bid problem, because now the contractors have to lay out $1 million and they wouldn't get reimbursed until actual delivery. So that was one of the things that we fixed in the bid package to allow them to recoup some of their outlay prior to the delivery. Either way, hope to be out to bid in June, early June, and then usually it takes between a month and 2 to get contracts in order and get the contractor authorized. Unfortunately, the big portion of the project, if that 6 to 8 month manufacture time for the bridges, nothing is probably going to happen, early next year. That being said, there's a possibility we could actually push the Duck Pond Bridge, so just replace the Duck Pond Bridge earlier, so because I know that's been closed for a while, and then come to the Route 120 pedestrian bridge next year once we have the order. So that's kind of the schedule that we're looking at right now. It's most likely going to be early next year, unless lead times on those bridges is significantly reduced. But that's that. I'll keep you updated as we get documents and want to go out to bid.
Okay, all right, thank you, Jeff, that's really unfortunate, those lead times are incredible.
Yeah, it wasn't expected.
Yeah.
It wasn't expected.
Okay, anyone have any questions for Jeff?
Jeff, that'll be bid as one project, but
It's bid as one project.
kind of phase
yes.
it where they could do the Duck Pond
Correct.
ahead of time.
Correct. Yeah, the Duck Pond
It
Bridge.
would be great to do that.
Yeah,
I would personally like to see that.
Yeah, I know that's been closed. There's no access from one side to the other, so we understand if we can have the Duck Pond Bridge installed first, that's going to be our preference.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
Okay, next Jeff's gonna talk about the Route 117 sidewalk. He's gonna talk about how we're gonna phase it, and it there's 2 phases. There's a need to have part of the project because the existing sidewalk is in such disrepair that we have to do that, and then there's a kind of a nice to have, which would be an extension of that sidewalk, and Jeff will talk about the 2 phases.
Yeah, so the mobile station on the corner of King Street and 117 is in significant disrepair. It's a little dangerous right now. There's a lot of slopes and high steps. So, one of the things that we have to do is replace that. And the fire department is currently running a project directly across the street. We're actually installing sidewalk and a new crosswalk in front of the mobile station. So I reached out to the design engineer for the fire department. I reached out to the fire department. We all had meetings with them, and we are doing our best to actually piggyback onto their contract, to use the same contractor for engineering and also construction. So these can be kind of done at the same time. We'll actually save probably a lot of time and a lot of money by being able to use the it was bid out by the fire department. It follows New York State, rules with respect to bidding. Hopefully save us some time. We can actually probably revise the DOT permit. DOT permits have been taking a significant amount of time. So ideally we'll be able to revise their permit to just include the other side of the street. That would be phase one. Timing, it'll be probably in the summer or maybe fall to get that done.
2025?
Of this year, yeah, it does depend on DOT, how long DOT takes to respond to the permit. It could take 6 weeks, it could take 6 months, so it's a revision. I'm hoping it's gonna be on the shorter side, but we're really kind of bound by that. It's gonna be, the engineering and the construction is not particularly long. It's really gonna be the permitting process that's gonna take the time. So that's phase one of the project, and then ideally I understand that the town would like to investigate actually extending a sidewalk on the east side of 117 to head down to Salem Road, and that allows a large development down there. It allows people to kind of walk up to King Street and access the sidewalks up there, get the shops and all that. So the second phase of the project is to do some investigation into what it would take to actually construct that sidewalk. That is a New York State DOT right away, so it would entail getting a new DOT permit. We have to do surveying and we have to do engineering. Once the surveying is done, we'll do a sort of feasibility and cost benefit analysis, because as it is now, we have some old surveys that are about 20 years old, and it looks like there may be some private land that we may need in order to have space for the sidewalk. So we won't know that until the survey is done. But once that's done, we'll obviously consult with the board to, see if they wanna move forward with that.
Yeah, I can tell you that is an important sidewalk. Every sidewalk is important to the community, but that one is really a matter of safety, because a lot of people travel that route to get to the current sidewalk, as which is in disrepair, but they do walk that way to get into town, and so it's a safety concern, and there are a lot of families, so that would be a very well utilized sidewalk.
Additionally, it provides safe walking access for that neighborhood to Grafflin.
So
Correct, either to Grafflin or into town.
the project would include the sidewalk, as well as we'd have to install a conveyance system, so a stormwater system to capture stormwater. Currently the water can flow off of 117 off the street onto the private lands and be absorbed or run down to the stream. When we put a curb up, it's going to we're gonna have to capture that water. So there is gonna be some, we're gonna have to open up the road, install catch basins and storm sewers that run down 117 and then probably down Salem to the stream down there, where it crosses under Salem. So that's all part of the surveying and engineering project.
And what do you think the timeline would be for that second phase?
That's very difficult to say. Again, this is a DOT permit. We actually have to get permission. Generally, when you're constructing sidewalks on a DOT road, you have to have a space for a sidewalk, which is minimum 3 feet, but preferably 5. And then you also are required to have a 5-foot, they call it a snow shelf. So people can actually, we'll end up clearing the sidewalk. We need room in the right of way to move that snow off the sidewalk. They can't deposit it onto private property. That's not the preference. So we need to get the DOT has to accept the fact that we're not gonna have a snow shelf, cause you know, we're moving from no shoulder to now a 10-foot wide. We're basically adding 10 feet in width to the road, which is a significant increase if, especially if private property is abutted up against it.
I mean, is that even possible? How much of the private property would we have to take?
Until we have the survey, we won't know.
The survey,
Yeah,
right,
so
okay.
we'll take, once we get the survey back, we'll know how much room we need, and then we can, we'll see what has to happen. But the DOT would have to, basically we'd ask them to relax the need for a snow shelf, which I believe they did down in Pleasantville along the same, just farther south. So, I'm optimistic that they would not require the snow shelf for us either. But again, we'll know more once the survey's back.
And I don't wanna speak so lightly about taking private property, that
Yeah,
is
no,
a
that's
process,
why
and I'm
it's-
not in favor of that, and I would hope that the DOT gives us some sort of variance.
Of course,
And perhaps some of those property owners would like having a sidewalk, so they would,
of course.
maybe consent to some.
Yeah, the first step is really getting information to sort of see exactly what's necessary.
Right, okay.
So that we actually just got the proposal, I think, for the survey. The survey is gonna take, I'll forward it to you. I don't recall what the exact number is. Actually, let me see. But they said it should take about a month or so to do the survey, and then we'll be able to take a look at it.
Do we know how or why the relaxing of the snow shelf rule happened in Pleasantville? I feel like we were going to research that and find out more.
I don't know. I know the engineer there. I'll talk to him and find out, or see how that happened.
Okay.
So Jeff, that wasn't always required though, right? And maybe Bart can comment, I see Bart online, that I think the sidewalk on Quaker didn't require that when we did that, I don't know, some 15 to 20 years ago. So I think it was that a change, Bart, to what DOT was requiring?
Yeah, I believe so. I wasn't involved with it then, but I know there is no snow shelf for the sidewalk on Quaker Route. And in fact, I don't know if that's even deemed like an official sidewalk because of the telephone poles that were there. There were some challenges with the width of it, so I think it may be a walking path, not official sidewalk. But there were concessions from DOT there, but we are, completely responsible for the maintenance of that sidewalk.
And we were thinking that maybe DOT would factor in the safety of adding a sidewalk there as opposed to having people walk in the street, and maybe they would take that into consideration when they were determining whether or not we need the snow shelf.
I mean, it seems really important. We talked about access to Grafflin. We also have a high school all the way up 117. So if we can find out more about it, and whenever we survey the town and the residents here about their priorities, they talk about walkability. I mean, that's always
It's a priority.
That's always priority number one. So just thinking about the location of the schools and how frequently residents ask about sidewalks on 117. Since they did this in Pleasantville, it would be great to be aggressive about it. Can I just ask, we're talking about 117, but at the mobile station and at the new firehouse corners, are the sidewalks curving around from 120 to 117, or is it just 117? The sidewalks.
I'm not sure about I'll be honest, I'm not sure about where I believe the fire department sidewalk does curve all the way around. They have sidewalk that's on Bedford that's a little bit north. And I believe it runs in front of the entire, it runs, there's gonna be a crosswalk at that corner between the fire department and the mobile station.
Mhm.
So ours is definitely gonna curve all the way around. It's gonna be walkable and safe when we're done. But ideally, I think from Salem all the way up past the bike shop and around the corner. If you wanna go straight, you'll be able to take that crosswalk.
Great, okay. All right, thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
That's very helpful.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get to our town board meeting, Rob, do you wanna run over
Sure.
not run over, but run through
Yep,
these
I'll go through.
admin items.
I'll go through the administrative items. We have 2 retroactive payment of claims dated April 25th and May 6th. We have an authorization to enter into a maintenance agreement for the standby generator at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. $36,955 is the total cost. The board will remember one of the reasons we had a settlement from our insurance company when the generator blew out before was because we continued to maintain it and it was in good shape when it actually blew out. It wasn't due to our lack of maintenance, so we're looking to approve that. We're looking to extend the contract for highway maintenance materials from Peckham Materials Corporation. That's for the asphalt mix. We have an authorization to make the final payment and release the retainage to Legacy Supply. That was for the water main replacement project on Pine Cliff and Meadow Lane, I think Ridge also. We have a final payment for that was in the amount of $23,987. Authorization for myself to attend the PERMA conference Thursday and Friday of this week. The cost is perfect. PERMA is picking up the tab, so no cost to the town. We have an authorization to attend the national conference for the Recreation and Parks for Jamie Bucci and Christine Gray. Total cost is about $2,700. This was anticipated in their budget, and it will be the only travel expenses that they have out of that budget this year. We have an authorization to renew the cyber insurance policy. The town board in executive session decided to go with the increased coverage, so we'll do that for the 25-26 policy year. We have an authorization to use town property for the SAB Electric Vehicle Show. That'll be at the train station parking lot on June 7th, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. With a rain date of June 28th. We have an authorization to use town property for the Lawrence Farms East Block Party. That's at 11 Taylor Road, made the request. It's from 1 to 9 p.m. Police chief has been in contact with the resident and he approves this request. We have retroactive authorization to use town property for the Garden Club for their plant sale that took place last week. We have an authorization to use town property for book drive. This is a student, David Schifrin. I think he did this last year at least, if not prior years. And, he's collecting books downstairs in a box. Those are to be donated to the White Plains School District for their book sale. We have an authorization to approve the change order for Tectonic. As Jeff had just discussed, we asked Tectonic to refine the bid documents and hopefully that will yield some more bidders the next time we go out. We have an authorization to use senior trust funds. Former town resident Doris Bedford passed away a couple years ago and donated funds to the specifically for the use of the senior citizens. We're looking for authorization for that. Authorization to use the tree bank funds. Ike has identified some plantings that they would like to put around the community center. We have an authorization to extend the contract award for HVAC maintenance at the treatment plant. That's for Kerry and Walsh. They've done it there for years and they're very familiar with the system. We have the authorization to approve a banner request from CCSD. And finally, authorization to purchase a 2025 John Deere Gator vehicle that's using the NYSERDA funding. The board already approved that. The bid ended up coming in over 10,000, so that's why we've come back to the board for specific approval for this. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Alright, so now I'd like to ask for an adjournment of the work session and opening the town board meeting.
So moved.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Jeremy. Alright, Rob, do you have any announcements to make?
Just a couple of quick ones. The water quality report, residents should look for that. That will go out by the end of May. We also include some other information from different departments throughout the town. That's an annual mailing. And I am going to mention, if anybody is familiar with Town Hall, over the last couple of years we have renovated the bathrooms both downstairs and the women's room upstairs. This year, I think following Memorial Day, we will be renovating the men's bathroom upstairs.
Okay, great. Are you going to have a town administrator's report? Because that seems to come in the middle
I'm
of
sorry,
certain
yeah, that
things.
was that's what I meant to
But
mention
that
for
will
the
be it.
administrative
Okay,
report.
very good. All right, so
I
now.
didn't have an announcement, I apologize.
That's okay, that's fine, this is good. Now I'll get to the supervisor's report. I just want to, let's see, I would just like to remind everybody that on Tuesday, May 20th is the Chappaqua Central School District budget vote and all the other school districts in Westchester and that fall within the town boundaries. And it's also the library budget vote and election. That is on Tuesday, May 20th between 7 a.m. and 9 p.m. at the Horace Greeley High School gym. There are 2 open seats on the CCSD board with 4 candidates and 1 seat for the library, which is uncontested. I would like to, moving to the next topic, I would like to recognize that this is Jewish American Heritage Month. Last year, the board determined to follow the federal government in an inclusive spirit to celebrate nationally recognized cultural heritage months. And we recognize them for the month and not the month and the year, so we won't be doing proclamations every year, but we did a proclamation for the month last year. So I'm now recognizing that this is the month of May and it's Jewish American Heritage Month in the town of Newcastle. And we want to celebrate the enduring heritage of Jewish Americans and whose values and cultures have shaped our character as a nation and whose resilience, faith, and hope in the face of adversity have driven us forward in an ongoing march for justice. And I also want to recognize that it is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. It used to be known as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. This was established in 1978. And I want to recognize the AA and HPI community for their important leadership and innovative work across many fields and discipline and their wide-ranging and significant contributions to our society and their resilience also in the face of adversity and prejudice. And we honor the many cultures that have come together to create the rich tapestry of our nation and have shaped who we are as Americans. I also want to recognize that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And we recognize the mental health challenges faced by millions of Americans. And I want to say that we're doing our part here in Newcastle. We have a wonderful and effective committee for mental resilience that is dedicated to supporting community members of all ages, providing a safe space for learning and sharing and reducing the stigma associated with emotional health challenges. They will be holding an Out of the Dark and Into the Light Sunrise Walk for Mental Resilience, which will be on Sunday, June 8th at 4 a.m. Last year was the inaugural walk and it was very successful. And we thank the committee members and especially Akiko Roy, who reached out to me last year and who made this possible. So now we have a couple more important recognitions. This week is National Police Week. And we want to recognize our Chief of Police, Jim Carroll, and our officers. The National Police Week recognition is from May 11th to May 17th. And it was originally proclaimed by President Kennedy in 1962 to pay special recognition to officers who have lost their lives in the line of duty to protect others. And I'm deeply grateful, sorry, this is a long night, deeply grateful to our Newcastle Police Department led by Chief Carroll, and the officers who have become part of our community. And we are very appreciative of the work you do for us. And I have a proclamation to offer you from the town of Newcastle.
Great, thank you.
And it's right here, I can read it very briefly. It says, whereas in 1962, President Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Police Officer Memorial Day and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week. And the town board of the town of Newcastle wishes to honor the service of our dedicated law enforcement officers around the nation and in the town of Newcastle, And now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Newcastle hereby declares and proclaims May 11th through 16th, 2025 as National Police Week for the town of Newcastle in the state of New York. And I would like to offer this to you
Thank
on
you,
our
thank
behalf.
you.
And that's Sergeant Paul Caparelli and Officer Travis Barrett.
Okay, you know what,
Thank you,
can we
Sergeant.
get a picture with the town board? And we are really fortunate to have our Assemblyman Chris Burdick here with us today. And Chris, I'd like to invite you to come take a picture with our officers too. Let's go over there, let's go down there.
Can you move the monitor behind him?
stand there.
Oh, Jeremy, I'm sorry.
He doesn't like to miss a picture.
Sorry, Jeremy.
Thank you. We can stand to the side and you guys in the middle.
Why don't you stand in the middle?
you're the
And we'll stand to the
moderator.
side.
Okay.
Chris, do you wanna come and
Don't be
stand?
shy.
Stand with the
What do you want,
officers? Right with the officers, right here. And here, you should hold this.
Well deserved.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, you should hold it open.
Sure.
You're the most important. You're just-
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Officer.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for your
Thank you.
service.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have to say thank you to them as well.
And we have one more recognition, last but definitely not least. This is Food Allergy Awareness Week. It's a week to educate and promote awareness of a serious disease that affects over 13 million Americans and 1 in every 13 children. We have our Horace Greeley Jr. here, Jared Science. Jared, you can come up. We wanna thank you for your advocacy work. I've known you since you were a 4th grader when you started advocating for allergy awareness, and you got it done. You spoke to our state representatives, and I remember that we had a press conference at Grafflin when you were a 4th grader. So thank you, Jared, for all the work you've done in bringing attention to this issue and to our local government and also to our state representatives. And we have Chris Burdick here, which is very timely to recognize you. And so we're going to come up again to take a picture with you, Jared, and present you with the proclamation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared. It's so nice to have you, as usual, here.
I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you and for letting us know that.
To be next to Jared.
Next to Jared.
For sure.
Switch in? Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Jared.
Congratulations.
Great work.
Hope you see him soon.
Thank you.
And I know you go up, you go up to Albany
He's
too.
he's gonna be coming up to Albany soon.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jared. Thank you. No, I don't. Maybe it was from.
I think he doesn't know either, okay. So nobody knows, got it. Okay. It's one less thing for me to worry about then.
I'll send you my.
Oh, sure. No problem, no problem.
Okay.
All right,
Chris
and
Burdick,
now I
come on.
want to welcome our New York State Assemblyman, Chris Burdick, who was kind enough to drive up from Albany to be here with us tonight to talk to us about the state budget. So Chris, we're honored to have you. Welcome, thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to hearing about your take on the state budget and the goings on in Albany.
Well, it's really good to be here tonight, and thank you for all the tremendous service that you do for the town of Newcastle. And you know, one of the things that I do want to emphasize is how important it is for me to be able to work with trusted representatives of the community, because in partnership, we can get so much done, so much more done by working in partnership and identifying what the greatest needs are and then going forward from there. So, you know, that actually segues into the budget that we adopted at 10 o'clock on Thursday night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It was a long haul, but that's all right, because we ended up with, I think, a very good budget. And I know that my chief of staff, Heather Mikolaki, had sent the full report. I'm not gonna read the full report. I'm just gonna give you what I see as the highlights. And I wanna emphasize the things that I believe are the most important for my district. And it's really in the sequence that you find in the report. Because you see that what I put here as number one is education. Because I feel that so much of what we have in my assembly district, the 93rd Assembly District, and certainly in Newcastle, are just superlative schools. And it's so much of the reason why we live here in Westchester County, and to take advantage of the schools, to take advantage of the natural beauty of the area. And so I consider one of the most important obligations that I have is to make sure that New York State is doing its part in helping localities with the funding for our schools. And so this year we had record funding for our public schools, K through 12. And you may recall that last year there was a little bit of a dust up, because the governor initially wanted to cut the support that the state was providing to local schools. In fact, 50% of the school districts in New York State would have received cuts, including Newcastle, Chappaqua, and all of the districts that comprise and serve Newcastle. Well, what a tremendous change it was between last year and this year. Because last year, we were able to push back and we ended up with a decent amount of funding. And so we didn't know what to expect with the governor's proposed budget in January, especially with education. But we were so pleased when we found that it provided strong support, and support that we were actually able to increase through the budget process. And you'll see from the report that Newcastle did very well. Every one of the school district that serves Newcastle had decent increases in the aid that was coming from the state, both in terms of foundation aid as well as total aid. And another key thing that we were able to do is that previously, what was called the Regional Cost Index lumped Westchester County to parts north, Hudson Valley. And we said, wait a second, what do you mean that we are separate from New York City and Long Island? We have the same costs. So we're starting to rectify that, and this year will be a third of the way towards parity with New York City and Long Island. And that helped as well. So we're off to a great start and strong funding there, which both does a good deal to ensure the continued excellence of our schools while also holding down school taxes. Another strong area you'll see from here is environmental protection. So important to water quality, so important to, again, the natural beauty that we talked about before, that I talked about before. And we have $425 million for the Environmental Protection Fund. and we have 500 million for the Water Infrastructure Act funding. Those are programs that help to get so-called forever chemicals out of our public water supply, hugely important, as you folks know right here in Newcastle. One of the things that we also were able to achieve, Senator Pete Harkam and I had worked together on this. We have $15 million in the budget for a pilot program for reimbursing private well owners for getting rid of PFAS in their water supplies. Because as it is now, only municipalities can qualify for that. Water districts can qualify to get funding from the Environmental Facilities Corp. So, but, you know, a lot of wells around here, a lot of wells going north too in areas that I serve. And so we wanted to make sure that there was some consideration given to that. And so that too is a great start. School meals, you'll see universal school meals, breakfast and lunch for every student K through 12. So that was in this budget. Also, what do you know, some tax cuts. Middle class tax cuts, which will be the lowest rates in 70 years. And when I say middle class, you'll see that if you look at it, that goes up as high as 300 and what do we have? I think it was $343,000 for married filing jointly. So that also is some tax relief that we have here. I also need to touch upon policy changes. And why policy changes? Because a lot of people talked about the issues that I'm gonna describe. And it was actually the reason why the budget was late. Because that's a lot of what we were negotiating between the legislature and the governor. 4 areas, and all 4 areas are areas which we know people in the state of New York care a lot about. One is cell phones in schools, you know, been talked about a lot. Ally, I know you had an email on that.
Sure did.
And I do support what came out, which was called the bell-to-bell ban. Now, it's not an absolute total ban. Obviously, medical reasons, for parents who need to reach their child, or for instruction in the classroom. That is permissible. But otherwise, you check it at the door when you come in, and then you, when the closing bell, you know, rings, then you pick it up. That's a uniform policy statewide. It will be up to the schools because they wanted to see some flexibility on how they're gonna handle the storage. And there's also funding in the budget that will help with that through a grant process. So that was worked through. I think it was a good compromise and it's a good policy. Another key area, we had read, you know, in the recent past about violent attacks by mentally ill people. Not just bystanders, whether on the subway platform or in the street, and some people being killed or seriously injured by mentally ill people. And so the governor had said, you know, we need to take a look at this. We need to take a look at our involuntary commitment laws. And so what this does is it provides for involuntary hospitalization where it is shown that that individual is a threat to themselves or other individuals because of their mental illness. And that individual will be hospitalized, have an opportunity, of course, for due process and a judicial remedy if it's to be fought. And also that upon release, they're going to get post-release help. And including in the area with the greatest need in New York City, there will be additional funding for additional beds in psychiatric wards of hospitals in New York City. So it's really a much more holistic policy to make sure that we're not just providing involuntary hospitalization and then leaving it at that. It's really to look at making sure that people with these problems are gonna be taken care of. By the way, the principal concern that the legislature had is to say, we need to have the resources for these people so that they're taken care of. And so that was provided.
Can I ask a question? I was
Sure,
gonna wait till the
please.
end, but
No, go right ahead.
yeah. How would it be determined that initially that someone should be committed involuntarily?
So, the way that it would be done is there would have to be
Vicky,
two physicians, one of whom
Jeremy.
must be a psychiatrist that would determine after an examination that the criteria were met for the involuntary hospitalization. And one thing that can be stated is that these standards now align with the great majority of states in the country. And so I think it was the right thing to do. I was among those who said, we need to make sure that their rights are preserved, and we need to make sure that they're being taken care of, because that's what we owe to those with that illness. I hope that
And I-
answered your question. Jeremy,
Okay,
did you know?
Jeremy has a question. Did you, Jeremy? No?
I'm okay, thank you, never mind, I'm okay, good, thank you.
Okay.
Face masks. I'm sure that you read the accounts primarily last fall and summer, where on some of the campuses in New York State, there were those that were concealing their identity with face masks and were intimidating and harassing other students, particularly Jewish students. And there was a strong sentiment that something needed to be done so that kind of intimidation, that kind of suppression of free speech, in effect, it was dealt with. And so the policy initially on face masks is, we need to make this a crime. We said, no, wait a second, do you really want to make it a crime in and of itself? And so the policy that emerged was that if a face mask is being worn with no valid reason, in other words, not for health reasons or something that's valid, in order to conceal your identity in connection with a crime, then that wearing of the face mask itself is a Class B misdemeanor. And so that was the policy that was reached and is now a part of the budget that was signed into law. Then the last item was criminal law procedure, and something tells me that Jeremy will jump in on this one. So we were hearing, and the governor was hearing, from prosecutors, district attorneys across the state, that cases were getting dismissed for trivial reasons, procedural errors in the discovery process. Discovery being the process by which defense counsel can find out, okay, what does the prosecution have against my client? And what was occurring is that lapses had occurred, but were items of discovery that were related, but not that relevant. They were related, they had some kind of bearing on the case, and so judges would dismiss it because it was in violation. Because the certificate of compliance that the prosecutor would issue would indicate that there's a lapse there, or at least it would be taken apart. And so instead what was done is that it had to be relevant, had to be prejudicial, and on the other side, prosecutors had to show due diligence in obtaining evidence and turning it over to defense counsel. So, and in addition, judicial discretion was provided whereby rather than dismissal, any kind of action on the part of the judge needed to be proportionate to the extent of the failure on the part of the district attorney. So that was the last of the large policy issues that were thrashed out in the budget. It took us an additional month to get it done. I think they were fair compromises. And the budget itself is a fair compromise. You know, I was asked today, well, do you have any disappointments about this? And I said, well, look, you know, it would be wonderful to have more money for our roads than we got. And by the way, we did get an extra 800 million for state roads and bridges. But you know, we're a very highly taxed state. And it'll get to the point where we would have had to raise income taxes. And we really did not want to do that. And so I feel that this is a good budget. It reflects the values of New Yorkers. We can be proud of that. We can be proud of the values that we have in this state and what we do to protect them. And so that's sort of a high level view of our budget, and I'm happy to field any questions you may have.
You know, I've always wondered about the state budget, why the policy questions can't be handled throughout the year. I understand that the budget provides the impetus for coming to a conclusion, but it holds up the actual budget. I also understand that some policy questions or policy issues need some funding attached to it, but nevertheless, the discussions that go into formulating the policy could take place at a different time, maybe earlier in the year, or you know, these things don't come up at a certain time. You know, they come up throughout the year, I assume. So I've always wondered how it is that you could separate the two somehow.
So it is a terrific question. And a lot of this goes back to the fact that in New York State, the position of the governor of the state of New York, whoever holds that post, is one of the strongest in the country. And so that dates back to the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State, decision called Silver v. Pataki. Sheldon Silver, the then Speaker of the Assembly, and then of course George Pataki, the governor of the state. And the Court of Appeals basically said, no, they have the right. The governor has the right to make these decisions and to include policy in the budget. Has the right to have line item vetoes. Some far-ranging rights were stamped and have remained in place and actually couldn't move without a constitutional amendment. And so we always have this debate that we say, now wait a second. You've got to have something that connects it to a fiscal matter. And yet, the governor's going to be able to do that. And I'm a full-time legislator. If I had my druthers, we would meet year-round so that we could really delve into fairly complex issues and give greater consideration to it. And in fact, what does occur during the budget process is that a lot of the proposed legislation is removed. It had to be negotiated with the executive to say, hey, look, we need to handle this in our regular legislative session so that it's more transparent, so that there's an opportunity for the public to know what's going on, and it can be considered more thoroughly. So it's a raging debate, but the governor has the power to do that.
So it's interesting that what was decided by the Court of Appeals, I would imagine, in New York, can't be undone except with a constitutional amendment. It can't be another challenge to that
Correct.
case.
I mean, and you know what's interesting is that I have been amazed at how many things are in the state constitution.
How did that get into, well, I don't mean to take up all this time, but it's fascinating. I mean, how did that get into
I don't
the
know the original
Constitution
origin
through
of it. But
To a court
it's
decision.
Article 7 of the New York State Constitution in which legislative proposals can be placed in the budget. And we give a lot of attention to those Article 7 proposals because our default setting is take it out. Take it out so that we can have that more thorough conversation. But it's Article 7 in the New York State Constitution that provides the governor that authority to put in legislative, statutory changes in the proposed budget.
Okay, so I gather it was an interpretation of the Constitution.
Well,
Which stated that
it's
that was
actually,
part
and
of
the Board of Appeals said,
Okay,
you got that authority,
Yeah.
done.
all right. Jeremy has a question,
And
and I knew that before I looked, yeah.
I have to, first of all, thank you so much, Chris, you're truly a trooper, there was no one, I love, Peter Harkin's fabulous, Dot's fabulous, everyone on the board's fabulous, but you are a machine. You are a machine, you get everywhere all the time, so thank you so much. That all being said, just very brief, the new discovery law, I have to read what the statute now says, but I was just pointing out there, like, I was son goes to Columbia, and there's just recently bunches, off campus and campus people took over, the library, did some damage. One of the problems with the law, and I've had this at least previously, and I've discussed this with Alvin Bragg, is that when you have to get as a prosecutor all the discovery, and it's now was just related, but it's changed to some extent relevant, if you have, for example, 50 cops show up, the argument for the defense, which I do as a defense attorney too, is I need all of their notebooks, I need all of everything from every one of those officers. And as a defense attorney, I say, I'm not gonna get completely because you're never gonna get it, and I'm gonna get the case dismissed. So they proactively kind of dismiss these cases. It is a real problem what the legislature did a while ago, and it's great that they're trying to fix it, and I really think they're doing a good job trying to move it in that direction. But it's not gonna protect that mass legislation at all, it's not gonna stop or enable prosecution of things on a mass scale where a lot of officers are involved, because the defense is gonna say, give me everything, and it's just not gonna be practical in a limited time period. So going forward, hopefully, can we fix some more, but I appreciate you taking the right steps, you really are doing a heck of a job, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you, those are very kind words, and I really did come to understand the position of the DAs on this, is that it was getting ridiculous that, inconsequential lapses resulted in dismissal of cases. How does that protect public safety? And how does that protect and serve justice? And so I found it so interesting that changing the word related to relevant.
It's a really big step.
A big step, that's a huge step. And also giving that judicial discretion.
Yeah.
So that, the judge can say, no, wait a second. This isn't
Absolutely.
sufficient to throw out the case. And so I think it was the right move.
I'll leave you with this, as a defense attorney, you'll set me, but as a New Yorker, it's the right move. And I have to jet because I have to speak about DD right now.
Okay, Jeremy, good,
Thank you guys.
thanks for being here.
Chris, I wanted to say thank you so much for supporting the bell-to-bell cell phone ban. You're right, I did email you about that, and I
Yes,
did ask for your
indeed.
support. In the last year or so, a group of very concerned parents started an OK to Delay chapter in Chappaqua, very concerned about the prevalence of cell phones in school. And as a result of Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, for those of you that are not familiar, run, don't walk, read it. It's top of mind for a lot of parents who have children not quite in middle school yet, but thinking about it. That seems to be the age where most children get cell phones. It's caused severe issues with children, adolescents' mental health. It's distracting in schools. And I just want to say thank you for supporting that bell-to-bell ban. I think
You're
it's
very
a
welcome.
big step in the right direction.
I think it is a big step. And it's interesting, as you mentioned, distraction, mental illness that can come from it. Also bullying is done from it. And so it really was time. And I really have to give credit to the governor that she last year did a statewide tour, had little meetings, hearing from people, really trying to drill down to find out what people were thinking. And and I think that was very helpful for the development of the policy.
I agree. Thank you.
It
Actually, I had a
feels-
question on that one. What's the implementation timeline?
I think my recollection, double check, but I think it has to go into effect this fall,
That's my understanding as well.
And it's K through 12?
Yes.
K through 12.
It seems like, Chris, and this is music to my ears, a lot of focus on mental health. I'm curious about the hospital beds and Westchester hospitals. And I wonder if we're looking statewide, if there's a focus on density and where, how many patients are treated at different facilities and how it will affect Westchester hospitals in particular. And that professionally, like I'm curious about that, because sometimes it is hard to find beds, not necessarily for people who pose risk to the broader community, but more to themselves. And being able to find a bed for them in a timely manner, in a good facility that's appropriate for them. So I'm curious about how those funds get distributed and the beds get found. But I'm also curious, and this is also, it's medical, but it's from a mental health point of view, medical aid in dying, which is on your sheet, but you didn't mention. On a personal level, having watched several loved ones die in the past 5 years, I know how important that is. I just wonder, I don't think that was really an option for them, and it's a lot about dignity at that point in your life journey. And so I wonder how that will actually be affected and enacted in New York State.
Well, I've been a co-sponsor of this bill from the time that I got into the assembly, and by the way, it's not, both houses have not passed it,
Right.
just the assembly has. And my own personal connection on this is that my wife's stepmother, who actually was a citizen of the Netherlands. And the Netherlands, many years ago, allowed for this, where directives could be given. And similar restrictions as is in the medical aid in dying bill, to ensure that there wasn't an overreach, that there wasn't an attempt by a relative to kill off grandma so that they could get the inheritance. They had to be of sound mind and be certified by physicians, and one of whom psychiatrists, that was the condition, that was the state of mind. Witnessed, 2 witnesses, and neither of the witnesses could be related in any way. And so a lot of safeguards in this to ensure that it wasn't being abused. And in fact, in the states in this country, there hasn't been any real incidents of abuse. But going back to my wife's stepmother's case, she had these advanced directives and she had a massive stroke. And the massive stroke had left her, in effect, brain dead. And in a vegetative state, I should say it that way, because she was living, but it was absolutely clear that she would never recover, and her physicians had confirmed that. And so her children acted upon the directive to follow her wishes. And my view is that was the humane thing to do, is to give those who are terminally ill and certified that they're gonna die within the next 6 months, control over their last months, so that they could make the decision on how they would end life. And it had to be certified, had to be shown, and And so I think it's the right policy, I think it's the humane thing to do. And so that's how I came to it myself.
So do you think it'll get through the?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know whether it's gonna get through the state senate. So,
And hospital beds, what say you?
you know, I can tell you that I can't speak specifically to the hospital bed question. I can tell you that this state budget did include substantial funding for hospitals that were having fiscal difficulties, which I thought was extremely important. A Westchester colleague, Amy Paulin, is the chair of the health committee, and I can tell you that she cares very deeply about the ability of our healthcare system to provide. And so she had taken the lead in ensuring for the funding for the hospitals. And so, and look, we face some deep uncertainties with what the federal government is gonna do. As I'm sure you all are aware, discussions going on right now in Congress about potential severe cuts, draconian cuts in Medicaid. And, you know, we're gonna have to see how that plays out.
Wow, Chris, thank you. You know, I guess I'll end what I wanna end with, we were talking about end of life, maybe go back to beginning of life and how you started about education. And I just wanna point out how important some of the funding sources that you mentioned are. And you know, the RCI, the Regional Cost Index, is something that not a lot of people know about, and it may sound like a small detail, but the change that you described for the RCI is huge. And you know, this is
Former school
something,
board member.
a former school board member, I was also a member of the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, and we did a lot of advocacy work. And the RCI was always on the docket as a huge issue. It's a factor that is part of the foundation aid formula. And you know, I remember we used to host these legislative forums, which they probably still do. In those days they were in person, so that was more fun. But I remember calculating that with a very well-versed gentleman from the Ossining School Board, I don't know if you ever met him, Frank Schnecker. And he once did a calculation for the School of Ossining, showing that if Westchester were in the same regional area as New York City, Long Island, you know, Nassau and Suffolk counties, rather than with Ulster County, that I believe that for Ossining schools, they would have gained an extra $1 million, $1 to $2 million. So just that change in the RCI is a big deal. And so I just wanna, and it felt like it would never happen. So thank you for hanging in there and, you know, staying at it and, you know, making really huge accomplishments for us.
Very welcome. And I can tell you, it's really good coming down here. And I think, and I appreciate the fact that you did offer that I could zoom in on this.
We did, just for
You
the
did
record.
indeed, which I appreciate, but I just think being here in person makes a difference.
It does.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thank you
Chris,
so
we
much,
really
Chris.
appreciate
Absolutely.
you. It's great to see you in person and I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for
And
being
thank you for
so-
the work you've been
Thank
doing.
you.
Very welcome.
Such a fantastic advocate for everyone that you represent. I'm so grateful for you.
Thank you. So, hope you don't have to stay too much later today.
No, and we will forgive you if you run off and go and spend time with your family.
Thank you so much, take care.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, and now we have one more presentation on the MS4 stormwater regulations.
Yes, we have.
And Sabrina, I'm assuming that you will be giving us this presentation.
Oh, it'll be a team effort.
Thank you for
Good evening,
waiting this,
everyone.
I know this is a late one.
It's
Thank
okay.
you for hanging in there.
Absolutely.
So we have Sabrina and Bart Carey.
And Jeff.
And Jeff and Dennis here as well.
Okay, very good, okay.
Alright, you ready? I'm gonna share my screen, put it up for you. This is our annual presentation of our stormwater management program. Okay. Tonight I'm going to walk you through the MS4 program, the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Program. I'm going to talk about, I guess the last time that the town board heard about this program, we were comparing the old regulations to the new regulations and kind of looking at the magnitude of cost that this new stormwater permit is putting us through. And the new stormwater permit went into effect last January, so we are currently operating in year 2 of our MS4 program. Let me just start. Let me make this a movie, I guess. So, what is stormwater? Stormwater is what, when it rains, when it snows, it's any form of precipitation that falls from the sky and hits the ground. If it flows on top of the surface instead of infiltrating into the soil, it's considered stormwater. When the water flows across the land, it picks up pollutants and carries them into our rivers, lakes, and streams. It's not only the pollutants that it picks up, sometimes the force of the water will erode the earth and pick up sedimentation. We also have to deal with flooding when it comes to stormwater if it's too much for us to handle. So that is the definition of stormwater, and that's what this permit is all about. Newcastle itself is located in what we call 4 major watershed basins. And think of a watershed like a cup. If you drop a drop of water anywhere in that watershed, it's going to flow through the water bodies, the streams, and the rivers to a certain point at the end, at the bottom, or the end of that watershed. We're part of the Croton River Basin, which is part of the New York City watershed. We're part of the Lower Hudson River Basin, the Bronx River Basin, and the Upper Long Island Sound Basin. And so there are smaller watersheds within each of these basins. These are their larger major names. Different areas of the community are dealing with different water quality concerns. In the Croton watershed, for example, it is phosphorus restricted. The state has developed what they call a TMDL, or a total maximum daily load of what can be discharged in relation to phosphorus. The Upper Long Island Sound, or actually the entire Long Island Sound, is nitrogen restricted, meaning that there's a number about how much additional nitrogen can be added into that water body. We have water bodies within our community that are on the state priority water body list, and they're listed based on different problems, whether it be pathogens, metals, or nutrients. We also have water bodies on New York State DEC's what they call a 303D list, which are major water quality issues in major rivers. The Sawmill River and the Bronx River are 2 of those rivers. Here's the history of the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's regulations when it comes to stormwater. In 1974, the Clean Water Act was put into effect. In 1997, the Historic Memorandum of Agreement to protect New York's drinking water supply was put into effect. And in 2008, DEC developed its first, developed its SPEEDIES program for the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems. It was called GP 08002. Shortly after that first regulation, the town developed its first stormwater management plan. That was in 2009. Since 2009, DEC has updated the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Program regulations in 2015 and 2017 and 2022. They worked on draft regulations. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we are in the midst of the second year of the 2024 update. So each year that the state has been promulgating stormwater regulations, each version of these regulations, they have become more and more stringent. Just to give you a sense, myself, Jeff, Bart, and Ike are the four department heads who are responsible for the departments who have a responsibility to implement the requirements of the stormwater control program. There's 6 minimum measures that I'm going to talk about next, but it's our offices that undertake the activities that are regulated through this permit. What is regulated? We have to adhere to what they call minimum control measures. There are 6 of them. I'm going to go through each one of these 6 minimum control measures, which range from public outreach and education all the way down to pollution prevention and good housekeeping. When it comes to public education and outreach, this new permit says to us we have to identify focus areas within 3 years. Focus areas are areas that are defined as TMDL watersheds, construction activities, areas with septic systems, and other what they call high priority land uses, or land uses that could potentially have more pollutant impact than other land uses. We also need to identify our target audiences and the associated pollutant generating activities that each of those audiences undertake. We have to identify the education and outreach topics and exemplify how education about these topics will reduce the potential for pollutants to be generated from the target audiences. And this has to be done within 3 years. Right now we're operating in year 2. Every year, we have to review and update our target audiences and our educational messages. Once every 5 years, we have to document our methods for distributing education and outreach materials. Once the town completes its comprehensive integrated mapping system, which we have to do within 3 years, we will provide education messages with information specific to phosphorus 2 times a year within the New York City watershed area. We are obligated to issue a message in March, and then anywhere from March through August, and then again from September to February. So we have to do 2 outreaches per year within the New York City watershed. So to give you a sense, here's a list of our target audiences and the topics. So you can see they range from public employees, residential property owners, businesses, contractors, developers, just the general public, landscape contractors, and board and committee members. And the topics, when we think about stormwater topics, we look to educate folks on proper erosion and sediment controls related to construction sites, proper management of those construction sites. We provide general stormwater information. We educate about illicit discharges and illicit discharge detection and elimination. We provide information regarding green infrastructure, better site design, low-impact development, pesticide and fertilizer use, and everything else under the sun that people may undertake that could impact water quality. So far this year, we've done some outreach. We've done a direct mailing. We're about to do another mailing through our water report. We have a mailing list consisting of almost 6,000 people. We've conducted public events and presentations. There's ongoing discussions on our TV and cable access channels. We have printed materials. Our inspectors go out and do daily inspections and educate different property owners and businesses and contractors on site. This summer, we will be developing our public outreach and education plan, and we will revise the information on our website in relation to stormwater and education. Right now, materials are available in the Newcastle Town Hall, the Chapel Library, they're at our town park kiosk, and in the Public Works and on the town website.
Sabrina,
This minimum
I don't know if it's better to ask questions after, but I'm just curious as to the public education and outreach. How, for instance, are we doing outreach to, let's say, landscape contractors?
We haven't done direct outreach to landscape contractors. We, through our leaf blower laws, the efforts of the Sustainability Advisory Board, all of those messages constitute education for landscape contractors. When we have landscape architects coming for either through our building permit process or through the planning board or zoning board, we educate them through those processes. So our education plan that we're developing this summer will do some pointed means to outreach to those specific audiences.
Okay, thank you.
Minimum control measure 2, public involvement and participation, has changed a little bit. In previous versions of the stormwater management regulations, it was about getting the public involved in specific activities. This version of the minimum control measure 2 in the new regulations require us to present our report annually, to provide an opportunity for public comment as we issue our comments or our report. We also have to distribute the opportunity for involvement through public notice, printed materials, electronic materials, mass media, workshops, focus groups. There's a whole host of selections as to how we can involve the public. We give the public an opportunity to speak at every public hearing, particularly in relation to stormwater management plans that the planning board or the zoning board are reviewing. And there's other ways for the community to get involved. We've identified the town engineer as the stormwater contact. So his information is available on our website. If you call, you will be directed to his inbox, to his contact. He is our stormwater contact. And annually, we post this presentation on our website, and we give people an opportunity to give us feedback on this presentation. I'm going to turn it over now to Jeff, who's going to speak specifically to illicit discharge detection and elimination and a minimum control measure for construction sites. Jeff?
Thank you, Sabrina. Yes, so the engineering department is responsible for implementing the MCM 3, 4, and 5, which are illicit discharge detection and elimination. Minimum control measure 4 is construction, and minimum control measure 5 is for post-construction monitoring. MCM 3 is mostly has to do with eliminating and identifying if there are discharges into nature. So some of you may or may not know, basically our entire stormwater system, as it captures water, it conveys it underground through pipes and ultimately discharges it to a stream or water body. We are tasked with monitoring every single one of those points where it discharges to make sure that there is nothing coming out that shouldn't be coming out, such as oil sheens, things like that, and making sure that they're also running properly, meaning they're not overgrown. It allows free flow. There's not garbage that's getting taken down into the streams and lakes. And part of the way we do that is we have a hotline for if the public does see something that shouldn't be. Again, we got a call a few weeks ago about an oil sheen, actually at that Salem Road stream. So we identified where that was coming from. We notified the DEC, and they handled it from there. Also, obviously includes a spill response protocol and how we enforcement of if there are discharges or somebody's not taking care of their property. So within the first 3 years of this, again, we're in year 2, we do have to create and maintain an inventory of all of our monitoring locations, which there are several hundred. And each of these, ultimately, at every point that we discharge a pipe into a stream, that's considered a monitoring point. So each one of those points is required to be monitored minimum once per year. And we have to log and catalog condition, and there's a host of items that we have to log in each of those at each of those points. We are through our mapping program that is all going to be electronic. Once we get that mapping program up and running, to try to make it more efficient for people who are out in the field to actually log in, and it'll be automatically updated on our GIS. Next slide, thank you. So another part of this, the reason behind MCM3 is because, as Sabrina mentioned, we have several impacted water bodies, and phosphorus is our major, most of our water body that we're responsible for is phosphorus impacted. So this alpha inventory, it includes all the land around it, where these things go. Again, having an inspection program that is readily accessible to the public, and also for audit by the state, who has given us the responsibility for this. And then additionally, one of the larger impacts on the department is going to be enforcement of on-site wastewater treatment plants, on-site wastewater systems, which are septic systems. So we must create an inventory of every single septic system. We have to know who has a septic system and ensure that it's pumped every 5 years. We started doing that by requiring, just recently, we're now requiring anytime somebody gets a building permit to submit a record of the last time that their septic was pumped. And also for tenant search.
So Jeff, I mean, most of our residents are on septic.
Correct.
So every single house that's on septic has to be on record.
Yes, we have to.
And somehow you have to keep track of whether they are on a 5-year schedule for. Correct,
and we are attacking it in sort of a multifaceted way. We can obviously, we generally know who's on the sewer system, the sanitary sewer system, which leaves everybody else on septic. So again, the way we're kind of generating this data that we're gonna have to use to track and eventually notify people, hey, your septic was pumped 5 years ago. Well, then sending reminders, ideally auto-generated. Last time you pumped your septic was 4 years ago, and you have to get a septic in order to be aligned with New York State regulations. You have to pump your septic within the year.
So when someone pumps their septic, they would then have to notify the town, is that?
Yes.
'Cause okay.
Ultimately, yes, we would need to have a record of.
That is a lot.
It's a lot of
I
education.
mean, the goal is extremely important. We all want clean drinking water. But it seems just an overwhelming task to keep track. I mean, this
it is
is
arduous.
only one requirement among many.
Correct, yeah, it is.
Yeah, I think in addition to the septic systems, Jeff, I didn't want you to leave out is the outfall inspection and repair program. If we are required under this permit, once we inspect an outfall, if there is a problem with that outfall, we are supposed to repair it within, I think, 6 months.
What do you mean by outfall? You mean a failing septic system?
Nope.
What do you
This.
mean by that?
See the picture? That's a picture of an outfall. And this outfall here, the stone around it is armor. It looks as if the armoring has failed. And the pipe needs to be cleaned out, and so that the water has a clear path to the stream. So all of our outfalls, we have about 328 of them. We have to inspect them and make sure that they're functioning. If they're clogged or broken, we are required to repair them.
Going back to the septic reporting for a minute.
Sure.
We have a year before we have to start keeping track of that, or is that something that we're implementing right away?
I believe that's 5, is that 5 years, Sabrina, that we have to have that? I believe we have 5 years to.
The town has 5 years before we are required to start monitoring that.
Oh no, we're supposed to start monitoring them now.
The program has to be fully implemented. People have to be pumping their septics every 5 years by year 5. And again, we're in year 2, so we have about 3 years to get this program up and running. get the list populated and it's like I said, it's a big
How
task.
far is the town away from having the capability to retain that information from residents and keep track of it and then notify residents when it's like how far are we from having like the internal infrastructure to even be compliant?
We have internal infrastructure right now, through, just accepting copies of the documentation with a building permit or a title search, attaching it to our property records, and, putting together an Excel spreadsheet that kind of has the date with the expected date of when it would need to be repumped. So, we can work off of an Excel spreadsheet right now as part of our mapping system that we're working on right now that will be up and running within, the next year. We'll be able to do that automatically and kind of create lists and mailing labels and notifications for those septic systems that are, need to be repumped when it's time.
Sabrina, are there best practices for keeping track of this data?
We are looking at a best practice right now with tracking it through building permits and title searches.
What
As
you
far
mean,
as hosting the data.
what you
This
just
is-
described?
Sorry?
Are you talking about what you just described?
Yes.
So is there not a better system than an Excel sheet?
Is there a
Oh,
digital platform?
yeah, it's through our mapping program, right? It's through a geographic locator, which is what we're in the process of developing right now.
Okay, well, that's important information.
Do we have a timeline as to when our mapping program will be
We have to have
totally
that
inclusive of
that
every?
mapping program implemented with specific information by year 3.
And we're in year 2 now.
Correct. So within the next year, we will populate that mapping program.
So is it safe to assume that we'll be moving away from a manual Excel sheet and be inputting all of this into the mapping system? And when I say all of this, I mean the septic stuff. Residential septic.
When you say manually entering, there will need to be some form of entering. It will not necessarily be into an Excel spreadsheet.
It just seems very onerous.
Really?
It is extremely onerous, particularly given the fact that we do not, as a town, regulate septic systems in Westchester County. They are regulated by the county health department.
So actually that leads me to a question. Why is this falling on the individual towns if it's the Westchester County that oversees septics?
Good question.
I don't have an answer for that. I wish it was different. When we were commenting on the draft regulations, we highly recommended that this be a county responsibility, not a town responsibility.
I know, Sabrina, we've talked about this in the past, but I just want to reiterate for those that are watching or may watch the meeting. This is a mandate and there really wasn't much encouragement of comment and feedback from local municipalities. Am I right?
You are correct. You are correct.
And to date, it's an unfunded mandate.
That's right.
This is a lot of, significant amount of work that has to get done by existing staff and, try to meet their deadlines.
The amount of increased record keeping that we have with this
It's
is
enormous.
is enormous, and that's gonna take, forget how automated the process is, it still takes input from a human that
Right.
we don't, are we putting the we're putting the structure in place, but it still takes somebody to do that. We don't have those people, and there's, we've had these stormwater meetings now for probably getting close to a year where this group has met, I've been included, Miguel's been included, and we're just, we tried to put a price tag on it, it's very difficult because, you need another, almost a whole nother department.
You need a staff of probably 5 or 6 on a yearly
Yeah.
basis to
Plus
manage.
equipment.
Yeah, to manage this MS4
We
permit.
do we know what other communities are doing, or is there any group problem solving that can be done here?
Platforms, like digital platforms?
We are, Sabrina, the GIS system that they're implementing here has been implemented in another in another part
At
of
a
the
county
state.
level, it's a model of a program that was implemented for Monroe County. But I have reached out when this permit was first went into effect. I reached out to Westchester County because there seemed to be certain elements of this permit that really would be much more efficiently served if it was done on a county level. And I did not get much discussion or support when I was asking for opening that door.
Yeah, and so far we've only talked about the inputting of data and tracking of it, but we haven't talked about the enforcement. I mean,
Right, well,
people won't necessarily always do what they're supposed to do in a timely manner. So they could hear that they have, they've reached their 5th year and they have to pump their septic. They won't necessarily do it at that time. So then what is our charge for that eventuality? I don't know, half the people don't comply with the schedule, they intend to, things happen, they don't get around to it.
Do
Then there's a whole enforcement.
We haven't gotten much guidance with respect to that, but ultimately we're responsible for enforcing it, and how we choose to enforce it is probably up to us.
So that is an entire other layer.
I believe the state
Yes, it
gives
is.
us, the state gives us the ability to go in and do it for them. And then we would have to charge them for it, or
Of the entire, okay. I understand what you're saying.
or we would, use some sort of notice of violation and, use the court system to enforce it.
We
haven't gotten to that point yet.
definitely have more program development
We haven't got to that point yet.
to undertake in order to kind of get to the end game. Right now, I think that our immediate challenge is really identifying who has a septic system, who doesn't have a septic system, and have you pumped it?
Is there anything that the licensed septic pumping agencies can help with?
So they generally have to report to the county when they pump a septic, so the county should have this data. Getting it from them, right now we have some other priorities, obviously staffing is limited, so we're implementing this is a year 5 issue though, the septic, so we are trying to get the stuff that's gotta get done in year 2 and year 3 first, and then when we have time,
I wonder if we should be talking to our partners at the county level to see.
So that's what I was talking about when I tried to get movement on this. The county has a licensing program where contractors are supposed to take down the addresses and they have to log the amount of flow that they collect from a property. And then provide this list when they discharge at a county manhole. That data is taken in by the county, but unfortunately it was not collected or is not being collected in a manner that is easy to disseminate to the municipalities. So over the years, we've gotten some information, but the quality of the information going in doesn't necessarily meet with the quality that we need to be able to track it. So part of the discussion in relation to the East of Hudson funds and the monies, my understanding is the county was wanting to re-examine or fund their septic program. I'd really like to understand more as to what that program is composed of and how can they take on some of this responsibility for us.
I support that.
All right, well, that's only one issue in a
Yes.
list of many.
Yes, so that's sort of
Going.
that sort of rolls up the minimum control measure 3. Next is minimum control measure 4, which is construction site runoff. So anytime we have a land disturbance for any type of work that's happening, whether it's a pool construction or addition, there's always a chance for when rainfall occurs for that disturbed soil to be carried off site. And in terms of you get muddy water or turbid water. So minimum control measure 4 seeks to manage that construction stormwater runoff. the town has done a very good job of that for a long time, going back to when they initially created the stormwater pollution prevention plan.
That's the sediment control that you put around the perimeter.
Yeah, it's typically called
Oh,
self fencing, so it's that
right.
black fence that goes up, it prevents the
Yeah, sort
larger
of black
particles.
plasticky.
Yeah,
I have a question about that. When construction is finished and you have a site visit and you go for CFO, are there provisions for the removal
yes.
of those? Because sometimes I see them on some properties and they're just sort of hanging out there and they never get removed.
So-
And I would think that also blocks the flow of water.
So the intent of the self fencing is to prevent smaller soil particles from traveling off-site and into the stormwater conveyance system. We do not allow them to remove that self fencing until native vegetation has been established. And when you do rain, you have grass or you have you don't have bare dirt. So generally that's up for several months, depending on when the construction's finished. The self fencing is up for several months. It has to be up for several months after construction's complete, until the vegetation takes.
I've seen that fencing stay up for years, so I just wanna ask whether there's a provision for during the inspection, are there provisions for removal?
That would most likely be handled as sort of a nuisance thing through the building department. Engineering, once the vegetation's established, they're allowed to remove it, and we do inspections. We do not make sure that they take it down, but we'll notify them that they can take it down once
Because once the
vegetation's
plantings have been established, I imagine that it interferes with the natural flow of water.
Water would run through it. It can probably redirect the flow a little bit, but generally the water will pass through it, just at
Okay.
a little bit of a slower rate.
I don't wanna hold us up too much on that.
That's okay. So this construction stormwater control program it identifies applicable construction sites, which is sites where you do have disturbed surfaces, requirements for the stormwater pollution prevention plans, procedures for how these are reviewed and approved. It includes pre-construction, we have meetings to ensure that the contractor understands what their responsibilities are for inspection and maintenance of these stormwater control measures, regular inspections, and obviously the closeout which we talked about. We've instituted pre-construction meetings for anything that's gonna be breaking ground, and we ensure that silt fencing is up prior to any ground is broken. Before permits are issued, it has to be up, just to sort of reduce the probability of getting contamination off-site. Here's an example of, so I think that's the end of minimum control measure 4. Minimum control measure 5 is actually post-construction maintenance and runoff control. So this what you're looking at here is a stormwater retention pond, which it's a stormwater management practice, we call it. So any time that new impervious coverage, which would be a house, a pool, a shed, driveway is created, the whoever the owner is required to account for the stormwater that now cannot pass into the soil. So you have a roof, obviously water's not gonna pass through it, you have to account for that stormwater, and one of the ways we do that is through, one of the ways that they'll do that is through a stormwater retention pond, which really stores the water until it can be infiltrated into the ground. This is just an example of one over at the Mavis on Summer River Road, and then I think we have another one up next. This is another typical, it's a man-made pond, man-made wetland that helps filter the water prior to it being infiltrated into the ground.
Does this also include like smaller projects on like a residential property?
Yeah, so residential property is typically not these larger stormwater retention basins. They're generally for subdivisions, larger projects. For smaller projects, they typically can. You might do a rain garden, which is above ground, but typically the people like having their lawn and they'll infiltrate it underground, which is they use some sort of a infiltration trench or infiltration system to do that. And that's the same idea. You capture the water so it doesn't run off site, and you infiltrate it back into the ground.
And I assume you're gonna talk about the monitoring and inspections that are required
That-
after.
So that is another huge undertaking where we have to log, catalog, and ensure that that inspection and maintenance it happens of all of these retention ponds and even infiltrators which are buried underground we're requiring inspection ports now, and they have there's actually a schedule over 50 years or I think 75 years of infiltrators where you have to do maintenance every year. This I just do one every year, every 2 years, every 10 years. And again, the town is responsible for making sure that all that maintenance occurs. It's
Sounds borderline impossible.
it's
It's a very large undertaking.
yeah, we again, ultimately once all these programs are installed, it's gonna take a team of probably 5 or 6 people to do the monitoring, the inspections, and then the enforcement. That's just, Bob Seelig, my predecessor, I believe Sabrina and a couple of people sat down and actually calculated what it was gonna take to actually handle this on and we're not talking about generating the program, which is what we're doing now, we're talking about just maintaining the program.
So bad.
So
Yeah, we talked, I mean, the numbers like millions.
yeah, it's what I think it was somewhere around $2 million, Sabrina, right? A year.
Yeah, it is, this particular requirement, previously, we had to worry about the 10 or 12 post-construction practices that the town maintains. This new requirement requires us to go out to every development that has a post-construction practice and ensure that they're maintaining it. And we have to identify that, we have to go back through our records to identify who has what, and make sure who is responsible. Was a homeowners association established to maintain their stormwater basin?
So we go back through these, like this is at Brandywine. Every 10 or 20 years, these stormwater detention ponds, retention ponds are required to be maintained, whether you dredge them or, kind of like what we're doing with the pond, it's required. There's a certain amount of storage that pond has to retain. And obviously as sediment comes into it and as vegetation grows and dies, that the amount of retention decreases. So over time, that, if it gets cut in half, you have to dredge out half of it. And we're responsible for ensuring that gets done. And again, if they don't do it, we have to either do it ourselves or find some enforcement method to ensure that they do it. And this is public and private. These large private retention ponds, there's not too many of them, I think 20 or 30 in that range. But obviously anybody who's done any work in the last 10 or 15 years where they put in infiltrators, every single one of those homeowners is gonna have to have some sort of an inspection program. They have to inspect it once a year to make sure that it's still working.
That'll really incentivize people to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's the financial impacts on not just the town but also residents is gonna be significant.
Yep.
All right, so what we were talking about here, the MCM5, which is the post-construction inventory and tracking, it's basically what we've been talking about. We have to ensure that all these SMPs, these stormwater management practices, whether they're retention ponds or rain gardens or infiltrators, are all we have to create an inventory of them and then make sure that they are maintained at the proper frequency.
No one's gonna do that.
It's eventually it will all go into our GIS mapping system, and ideally, things are a little more automated, but ultimately the cost is gonna be borne by everybody involved.
And just to reiterate, there's no funding coming with any of this.
Not yet.
We did receive a grant for our mapping program, but everything else, no.
Alright, I think we're up to Oh, no, okay. So we
I'm gonna talk about post-construction. So another component of minimum measure 5 is a post-construction stormwater management program for the New York City drinking water supply. Because we have land area within the east of Hudson watershed, we are required to develop a retrofit program. This is a program that has been ongoing from previous stormwater permits, and we have become a member of the East of Hudson Watershed Corporation. We are achieving compliance with the retrofit program requirements because of what's called umbrella compliance. We have a 25.1 kilogram removal requirement per year. For a 5-year period, it's a cumulative. And we are able to account for meeting that goal because we are working with Bedford, Brewster, Carmel, Portland, Kent, Lewisboro, Mount Kisco, North Castle, North Salem, Patterson, Pound Ridge, Putnam County, Putnam Valley, Somers, Southeast Town of Pauling, the Village of Pauling, and Yorktown, and we are all joining forces to take credit for each other's projects. I'm now going to turn it over to Bart, who is going to talk about minimum control measure 6. Bart, it's all for you.
Thank you, Sabrina. So the Department of Public Works is largely responsible for most of the items under minimum control 6. So we are currently reviewing the BMPs, which are best management practices, for the stormwater plan that we've had in place since 2011. That was created by a consultant back at that time under the previous permit. So we're looking for the differences in trying to come up with a plan to update the best management practices. A lot of it is, as the title is here, it's pollution prevention and it's good housekeeping. So at the Public Works facility, we work to minimize exposure and try to avoid having any pollutants discharged into the environment at our facilities. We do this by working on all of the vehicles inside of the mechanic shop, preventing fluid leaks from our equipment, and if there are any fluid leaks that are outside at the site, they're cleaned up promptly and thoroughly so that when the rain comes, it's not going to wash a sheen of water into the stormwater system. It's all cleaned up. We have absorbent pads and speedy dry type absorbent materials at the facility. Some of the other things we do are keeping our materials under cover. For our winter operations, our salt is all stored inside of the salt dome so that the rain can't get on the salt and have that go into the environment as well. We have covered all of the dumpsters at the recycling center. They have black tarps that roll to the side. We open them when the recycling center's open, and then we close them up, especially if we know that rain is coming. At the recycling center, we've also had some small storage sheds installed, so most of the items that are collected are not out in the weather. They collect batteries there, which could be lead, lithium, nickel, cadmium, ions. So those are all stored so that they're not out in the rain until those are recycled. So for vegetation management, we have a roadside mower that we send out in the spring, and we mow the sides of the road with that, and the Parks Department does all of the playing fields and the grass. For the erosion and sediment controls, we make sure that on all of our projects we use silt fence when it's required. Sometimes we'll use hay bales instead, or choir logs if we're working on like up near a stream. The DPW and recycling are high priority facilities at this point. In time, all of the other facilities are classified as low. We do training annually, and this past December we did training for all DPW and park staff on pollution prevention and good housekeeping. We did watch some videos that were prepared by the Schenectady Soil and Water Conservation Agency, and that's another thing that we would like more support from the state on. It is training. So we've done pretty well finding materials that have been created by other agencies, but there really isn't a lot coming to us from the state, which is something that we would hope that they would improve upon. So also at the DPW facility, one of the reasons that is considered a high priority facility is because we have a gas and diesel there. It's a fueling station for all of the town fleet. One of the good things that we did in the past 4 years was in 2021 we replaced all of the storage tanks for gas, diesel, and heating oil at the DPW facility. They were previously underground tanks. They're now all above ground tanks. When the new facility was designed, our consulting engineer also created what's called the Spill Prevention Controls and Countermeasures Plan. And so we have that in place and do the training that's required in that to maintain those tanks and to ensure that there's no spills from those during fueling. Sabrina, if you could go to the next slide. You're already there. You can sit in this one.
That one?
Yes. So on this one, just a little bit on the second bullet. So within 5 years, the high priority facilities need to have a SWIP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan, created. So we have one for the DPW that was created in 2011. So we need to get that updated. We have to issue an RFP to get a consulting engineer on board for that, and we may do that later this year. That depends on funding and how that looks. We started this year with some money in the budget, and I think primarily that's for mapping and some of the other things. And Sabrina has been good at getting grants, and I think has a grant for most of the mapping, but we'll see how that goes. And if there is some money left, we may be able to do that at DPW this year to get that new SWIP in place so that that's compliant with the new regulations. But we do have some time for that. The wet weather visual monitoring, that's a 5-year requirement that we have time to put into place, and that's something that we can do in-house. That's thankfully not an owner requirement. Next slide here. This is one of the biggest impacts to the Department of Public Works is this new requirement on catch basin inspections and cleaning. So with the new requirement, and especially since the majority of our catch basins are located in areas that convey water to sensitive water bodies, we're required to inspect catch basins twice per year. For any other areas of the state that are not near these sensitive water bodies, the inspection of catch basins is basically determined by how often they fill up. So it's on an as-need basis. So that could be like once every 5 years. So this is really a big impact on us being required to inspect all these catch basins twice a year. In 2024, you see at the bottom, we inspected 348 catch basins. There's 1,583 that need to be inspected twice a year. So we were fortunate that the weather cooperated with us early in 2025, and we were able to complete inspecting the remainder of those catch basins. But that, like I said, it's really a huge undertaking, and we were able to do that because we didn't have huge snow events this year. We had most of the snow events were ice, and a lot of small snow events that were only 2 to 3 inches. So in between those, when the snow melted, we were able to send staff out and complete these inspections. If you had significant snowstorms and there was more accumulation of snow, it would be harder for us to do that. we're required to do these again in the fall, and I don't know that we'll be able to do that. You know, it's gonna depend again on the weather and all the other projects that we have going on. So then the other thing that comes along with inspecting the catch basins is cleaning them out. So they have new criteria for that. If the catch basin is more than 50% full, it's supposed to be cleaned out within 6 months. If it's less than 50% full, it's supposed to be cleaned out within a year. So we have now identified through these inspections 559 catch basins that are supposed to be cleaned out within the next 6 months. Over the past 5 years, we've been cleaning out 85 catch basins a year. So based on what we've been able to accomplish in the past, it's not looking good for us to be able to complete cleaning out 559 catch basins. One of the things that we're hopeful will help improve upon that is getting the new back truck that was ordered, and we did get some grant fund for that. We're hopeful that that will be here by the fall, and that will increase our productivity, but still trying to get 559 catch basins cleaned out this year. It's going to be really a daunting task. So one of the other requirements is proper handling and disposal of the materials from the catch basins, which is difficult. So the state has tried to help out, and for street sweepings and catch basin material that's collected, they've created what's called a BUD, which is a beneficial use determination, so that we can reuse the material. The only thing is that the BUD says that we can use this material in place of commercial aggregate for the construction of roads and parking areas, or as backfill for utilities within transportation corridors. The only problem is this material really is not good for those purposes. So although their intent was to try and help us out, it's really not a practical solution at all. Nobody would build a road or a parking lot with these materials that we're collecting from street sweeping and cleaning out catch basins. So we have to look at other alternatives for disposal of that. Next slide, Sabrina.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. So street sweeping, this is one of the areas of the program where we are meeting the requirement. We have been for years. There is something new with the street sweepings that we're looking at implementing, but as far as completing the sweeping of all of the roads and the parking areas, we are fully compliant in that. This year we're handling the street sweepings a little bit differently than we have in the past. Again, so they want everything to be stored under cover, and in the past we stored these outside. And so what we're doing this year is we have some room in our salt storage shed, and we're putting all of the sweepings that we're collecting over the next couple of months in there until we can dispose of them. And so what we're also trying to do is take them to a transfer station, and from there they'll be brought to a landfill and disposed as solid waste. But this is a new cost. This is not something that we've had to pay for in the past. We do have 2 street sweepers. One is a vacuum sweeper. That's a 2022 model year, our newest sweeper, and the other one is a mechanical broom sweeper. That's a 2015 sweeper, and they're both in pretty good shape. But the older one, 2015, will probably need to be replaced in a few years, and these are very expensive pieces of equipment. Kind of completes what I have for minimum control.
Well, that kind of completes our presentation. If anybody is interested in more information, you can contact us in the development department. There's our phone number. You can also find us on the website, and happy to answer any other questions you might have.
I'd say that is quite a lot of information. I would be really alarmed if there were any more. First of all, I wanna thank all of you for this incredible amount of work that you're doing. Just to lay this out for us and get through these regulations to make sense of them. And then actually undertaking this work, which seems almost impossible. And I know that for a town, although I always thought this was kind of a lean and mean operation, we're pretty well staffed compared to a lot of towns. And if it's a challenge for us, I cannot imagine what all the towns in Westchester are going to do. I have to ask myself, the goals of this are really commendable. Clean water and good practices are extremely important. We all have to be responsible. But I do have to wonder about the people who sat down to write this, who they talked to, and why they did not bother to ask. And Sabrina, I know you said that they didn't take public comment, but I know that there was a process throughout the years with all of the permits. They took feedback, but at the end of the day, they came out, after taking all the feedback, they came out with the final MS4 that we have now.
Correct.
Without taking feedback and with really onerous requirements. So after taking feedback for all those years and then deciding at the very end to not take it was really a breakdown somehow in the process. And I don't know why it happened, it doesn't matter why, but this is going to be extremely daunting for everyone. And expensive, exorbitant. I'd be shocked if people were able to do it.
Just as an aside, I'd be curious if we did some sort of cost benefit analysis after 5 years and see what the reductions and things are and what the cost is and figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze. That's a political question.
Well, these are requirements and obviously we are going to do everything in our power to comply.
We are,
And that's what we do.
and where we can, we just report it and we just document.
I will be curious to see the results.
Yep.
And I don't mean just for us, I mean for everyone subject to these regulations. Now, just to be clear, these are all east of Hudson regulations, right? Or do they pertain to all of the areas that you showed as basins?
Right, there are, the regulations are town-wide. There are what they call heightened permit conditions based on the watershed's specific needs.
Right, so east of Hudson has extra regulations.
Correct. There's a minimum standard for the entire town, and then there are additional requirements depending where you are within the town.
Right, so we haven't even touched on those yet.
Well, they're incorporated into this presentation.
Okay. Well, I know it's taken a long time, so I don't wanna go over it, but at some point I'll wanna go over with you which of these elements pertain to which areas.
Okay,
Yeah,
no problem.
okay. Thank you very much. Does
Yes.
anyone have any questions? No.
No,
You do not.
no, it's time to move on.
Just impressed.
All right.
All right, good night, everyone.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
good night, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Jeff, and
hanging in
thank
with
you,
us.
Bart,
Thank you,
and
Dennis,
thank you,
and Bart,
Dennis
and Sabrina.
first, and thank
And
you to the
Eric.
one person
You guys kicking me
in
out?
the audience, Eric Marmon, who has many questions
I don't think it's gonna last.
and who will come up. Eric, this is your chance, because we have now reached the public comment period. So anyone with questions or comments,
You have to walk over to the mic
please
though.
feel free to come up. We have no public comments from the floor. Are there any public comments online? No hands are raised, okay. So now we will move on to our consent agenda. Rob, do you wanna run through it
Sure.
for us?
The consent agenda for tonight, we have the authorization to extend the highway maintenance materials bid for Peckham Materials. I missed one on the other page. The authorization to enter into the maintenance agreement for the emergency standby generator at the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. Authorization for the final payment and retainage release to Legacy Supply for the water main replacement on Pine Cliff and Meadow Lane. Authorization to attend the PERMA conference for administration. Authorization to attend the conference for recreation and parks. The authorization to renew our cyber insurance policy. Authorization to use town property for the SAB electric vehicle show. For the Lawrence Farms East Block Party. I'm sorry, that's not town property, but authorization to allow the block party at Lawrence Farms East. Authorization to use town property for the Chappaqua Garden Club for the plant sale. Authorization to use town property for the book drive. Authorization to approve the change order to Tectonic for the Route 120 pedestrian bridge replacement project. Authorization to use senior trust funds for recreation and parks. Authorization to use tree bank funds for recreation and parks. Authorization to extend the contract award for inspection HVAC maintenance agreement for the Millwood Water Treatment Plant. Authorization to approve the banner request for CCSD. And finally, the authorization to purchase the 2025 John Deere Gator utilizing NYSERDA funding for recreation and parks.
Okay, thank you, Rob. All right, and the proposed actions are clearly set out in the resolutions, so. Okay, so we can get to our consent agenda items. Holly, do you wanna start?
I will. I move to adopt items 1 through 16 as listed on the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims in the amount of $2,710,907.71 listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail report, both dated April 25th, 2025. Checks were printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Friday, April 25th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead.
I move to retroactively approve the payment of claims, the amount of $445,916.30 listed on the summary AP check register and detail voucher detail report, both dated May 6, 2025. Checks were printed and distributed to each claimant listed on Tuesday, May 6, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to accept the resignation of Christopher Rikers from the position of seasonal laborer within the Department of Public Works Highway Unit effective April 25th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. I move to authorize the hiring of Bryce DeFalco for the position of seasonal laborer within the Department of Public Works Highway Unit at the hourly rate of $16.50 effective June 2nd, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Go ahead, Jen.
I move to authorize the hiring of the following individuals for the position of recreation attendant to serve as camp counselors at the corresponding rates seen below, effective June 30th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the increase in the rate of pay for the following individuals who serve as recreation attendants within the Recreation and Parks Department, effective June 30th, 2025. See list below.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Mary Ellen Douglas for the position of recreation attendant within the Recreation and Parks Department at the hourly rate of $25 per hour, effective May 19th, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I move to authorize the hiring of Dylan Bayer for the position of student intern within the engineering department for the stipend amount of $2,000 effective June 2nd, 2025.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.
That was, might be the second longest one.